Welcome everybody to this afternoon panel. I hope you've had a lot of coffee to be able to stay awake with us after this very nice and appetizing lunch. So the session this afternoon is about digitalization, and one of the key trends we talked a lot about this morning, the different panelists talked about that is shaping the global trends today on trade is the digital technologies. And so today, to talk about these trends and how they impact TPOs globally, we have the pleasure to have with us five distinguished panelists. Mr. Francisco Morales, Chief Executive Officer of ICEX Spain. Morales. Okay, so Mr. Francisco Garzón. Mr. Daniel Kung, CEO of Swiss Global Enterprise. Ms. Su Lingyan, Deputy General Director of the CCPIT in China. Mr. Niels van Boxel, Chief Information Officer of Austrade. And Mr. James Doran, Head of Content of Dubai Multi-Commodities Center. Thank you for being here with us today and sharing your own experiences with the audience. Maybe a few words on how to introduce basically the digital and its impacts on trade. Today, everybody's, digital is undoubtedly changing the way people interact and communicate and also make trade. Facebook has close to 2 billion, I think, 1,800 million users. Among them, 1 billion have international friends. Which we couldn't say before was the case, right? Alibaba has 450 million users, among which 10 million companies, and most of them having international relationship and international exports. So to the extent that today, a recent McKinsey Global Institute report issued last year valued the fact that digital flows today are creating as much GDP and as much contribution to global GDP as is physical trade flows, as are physical trade flows. And this is an amazing impact. This is completely new. Over the past 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, physical trade of goods has been one of the global engines of growth and prosperity. And what we see today is that international trade of goods are flattening. It's also the case for financial trades. They're flattening, they're stabilizing, while what we see is that international flows of digital flows have actually multiplied by 45 over the past 10 years and are still going to multiply by 10 over the next 5 years. So this is, we see that globalization is really taking a digital path versus a goods, let's say, path. As it was the case before. How does these, how do these trends impact TPOs? We see three different type of segments of companies that are changing and that are transforming in the way they do their business, and that are causing actually TPOs to adapt. The first segment is e-commerce. So today, companies basically using digital as a channel to sell instead of the typical forums and fairs that we usually do. And the trend of growth of global e-commerce, international e-commerce trade, is increasing by 20% per annum, much more, at much higher pace than are the typical, let's say, international trade. So this is one important segment. The second important segment is what we would call the digital innovators or the digital disruptors, which are companies that are selling digital as a service. We're talking here about IT companies, innovation companies, application providers. A recent studies, same thing from the MGI, has identified that 86% of companies that are born digital today are immediately global, are immediately trading internationally their products. It is not the typical path that we used to have, which is companies are born, they serve their domestic markets, and then they export. Now they are born immediately digital, and this changed completely the way TPOs should actually interact with these companies, and we'll talk about it a little bit further today. Then there's the third segment of companies, which are the traditional exporters that export goods and typical goods and services, and these also are increasingly demanding digital tools and digital services delivery from you. And also because they now operate digitally for everything they do. We can also, they're also starting to produce digitally with 3D printing, as we discussed this morning, but they're expecting more and more digital services from you. And so the panelist today has accepted to talk about these different trends. What I suggest is to start with Ms. Shuling Yan, who will tell us about how China is working on the e-commerce as one of the segments that we've discussed. This is Ling Yan.
Okay, nice to meet you here. And I'm very pleased to attend the TPO Network Conference here. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like to communicate with representatives from trade promotion organizations all here. And first of all, on behalf of China Council for the Promotion of International Trade, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations International Trade Center for the invitation. I'd like to start my discussion on the effect of digital transformation on TPOs from the way of changes of foreign trade, focusing on e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce. Although the world economic recovery remains weak, the cross-border e-commerce have promoted the economic integration and trade globalization greatly, and enjoys rapid development in recent years. By significantly reducing the cost of trade and obstacles between countries, shortening the international trade supply chain, and enhancing the profit margin of enterprises, cross-border e-commerce is triggering huge changes in global economy and trade. For China, China's cross-border e-commerce transaction volume last year reaches renminbi 5.6 trillion, 28.6% increases from last year. But for the traditional trade, the volume decreased about 7% for last year, which is 24.59 trillion renminbi. So, with the intensive implementation of cross-border e-commerce support policies, it will continue to maintain rapid growth in the future. China conducted a cross-border e-commerce comprehensive pilot test in Hangzhou, a famous city for G20 this year. And China set up another 12 pilot zones for cross-border e-commerce, including Shanghai, Tianjin, and Chongqing in the west, and other cities to promote the liberalization, facilitation, and standardization of cross-border e-commerce. In the just concluded B20 summit, China advocated the establishment of electronic world trade platform to promote public and private dialogue between the government and the private sectors in the field of cross-border electronic commerce. Against this drawback, the conference focusing the digital transformation had significantly meaning for China. I hope the extraordinary ideas of the guests will certainly be great helpful for enterprises to develop the market. China's Council for the Promotion of International Trade, we launched the Overseas Promotion Plan for China's cross-border e-commerce enterprises this year. This is a new project proposed by CCPIT, aiming at cooperate with domestic, well-known e-commerce platforms and enterprises. And we want to work closely with overseas business associations to have enterprises to promote their products by using CCPI's channel advantages. In the future, we are willing to work with more overseas business associations and companies to jointly promote the healthy and orderly development of cross-border e-commerce. For CCPIT, we have two pillars to work on the trade and investment promotion, and we also have legal services. These two pillars will give opportunities for the enterprises to work closely with us. And we hope to enjoy our cooperation with the other organizations, other TPO from different countries. Thank you. And I apologize for my early leaving due to the time schedule. So after my speeches, I'm sorry I have to leave earlier. Is it okay?
Pleasure. I understand the constraint. Thank you for being able to be present with us. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we heard about how China is working on the e-commerce side. Maybe moving the floor to Mr. Francisco Garzón, who can tell us about how you have adapted basically your organization to service the increasing digital demands from your clients. Maybe you talk about your portal experience, but also on how you've been able to serve the digital disruptors in a very innovative way.
Okay, thank you, Yasir. Thank you very much. I would also like to start by thanking the ITC and our hosts for having us here. Well, thank you for your question. We had to adapt our organization mainly to a new consumer, to a new profile of consumer, to a new profile of company that demands our services. We have to bear in mind that now our customers are connected 24/7, multi-channel, multimedia. They want our service or our information right away, any time of the day, anywhere, and that is a challenge. That poses a challenge for us. So we had to interact and provide services to them in a different way. We were not used to doing things that way, and we have, in order to do that, to adapt our tools, our services, and our organization to meet the needs of this new profile of customer. I will try very quickly to give you a flavor of different things we have done. Some of them maybe today are quite standard, but at the time we adopted them 2-3 years ago, at least for us, they were new. First, our new portal. A new portal that at the time that we introduced it in 2014, it was the first responsive portal in the Spanish administration. Now this is pretty standard, but then it was the first responsive portal. In this portal, we integrated the whole organization. We had to integrate different organizations that had merged into IFEX. We had to put all the contents that were dispersed scattered in almost 100 different sites with country and sector-specific info. We have to also introduce the social media aspects and develop our social media, our social network strategy within the portal, and also integrate the services within the portal. And digitalization of services, telematization of services, so that our companies, our clients can do everything within the portal as regards our services. Relating to the portal, of course, we've gone digital in our contents. We did that a long time ago. Digital newsletters, audio, video, apps, specifics for specific apps for sectors and for countries, a virtual e-learning platform. All of that is in the portal. We have worked pretty much on a content positioning strategy, so to promote the use of our digital services. And now we are, as regards this, also in the process of doing a better use of web analytics. We're improving the web traffic data collection, and we should be able to use this information for decision making. We are not quite yet there, but we should be able to do that. That will be regarding our portal. Of course, also a new customer relationship system. We did have partial tools for our customer management, but I must admit we did not have a complete customer relationship management system that we are launching right now. So now we have the whole organization 360 degrees covered by this CRM, integrated with the portal, of course, with a single database and with the specific management applications for different business areas in the house. And third, very quickly also, how we have approached or used social media. It's a threefold way to look at it. First, we have used the social networks for our own mix, marketing mix as an institution. Spain has the third largest social network community among TPOs. We have, of course, we also use social media in our marketing mix of Spanish companies and Spanish sectors. And of course, we also use social networks in the provision of services. This is all probably very straightforward also, but we have been introducing this, and if you do not succeed in using social media, social networks for these three aspects, I believe, you are not in today's real world. So those will be the three things I wanted to mention about how we have adapted to the new needs of our customers. And responding to the second part of your question, how do we interact with those digital disruptors? Well, to tell you the truth, it wasn't easy because we are very used to dealing with companies that trade with goods. We are also very used to working with companies that are in the world of engineering or architecture or infrastructure. But the real digital disruptors were a little alien to us just a few years ago. And this is an unstructured world. This sector is very heterogeneous. Companies from many different walks of life that you can label as digital disruptors or IT or scientific-based, you name it. So we had to turn ourselves into community managers. Those companies didn't know us. We didn't know those companies. We had to reach out for them, try to get to know them better. And the way we had to do it is to gain their trust, so that they could realize that although their products and their services are completely new, we could help them internationalize. And we created new ecosystems of companies that were not there before. For instance, we had to tell a new story to put under the same umbrella a good number of heterogeneous companies. And one of the things we did is to use the smart city concept that came across this morning. You can label many of the things that these disruptive companies do under the concept of smart cities. And we have used this concept intensively to put together the Spanish offer and to promote it abroad through different sets of tools. And we are doing also this in other fields that for us are completely new, and maybe a year and a half we had done nothing with them, and now we have turned into community managers for the world of cybersecurity in Spain, for instance, and we're working on the field of fintech, trying to put together the Spanish offer and be the community managers, the motivators of those fields in which maybe a year and a half ago we had not worked before. So that would be, in general, the approach we take to this new world of digital transformation and digital transformed companies.
This is a very interesting way to show how you've evolved your product offering to become a community manager and packaging a national offer to be able to sell it better. Very interesting. Turning maybe to Mr. Niels van Boxen from Austrade. Thank you for being here also. Can you also talk about how some of these challenges the traditional players have, how did you face these challenges, and also how it led you to internally evolve in a much more agile organization to be able to sustain the pace of change within the organization, your customers?
Thanks, Yasir, and thank you also for the opportunity to be here. It's really interesting, digital transformation. We often talk about the organisations that we work with, and the demands that they have on us, I think, are much greater now. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about our transformation internally, because expectations are higher, I think, from the organisations that we deal with. I think, Francesco, you mentioned it also, that people do want to be able to communicate with us across different channels. And I use the term seamlessly, but I think that is really the case, be that via the web or via social media or even through the contact centre, and whatever other channels there might be in the future. And I think that we have a pretty good understanding today about what their needs are, but I'm very confident we don't know what they are going to expect from us in the future. And that poses a real challenge for us, because we know that we're going to have to be more responsive than we are today, that we're going to have to be able to develop solutions or provide services in very different ways than what we do today. I guess for Austrade, we've asked some questions to ourselves about, how digital ready are we to be able to provide the relationship that we want to have with our stakeholders, to be able to target content and services based on people's needs, and really having a good understanding of the segment, the market, and their drivers. I guess digital reach is a big thing for us as well. How do we reach as many people of our stakeholders? Australia is a very large country with a very small population, and of course the world is a big place. How do we use those digital channels to extend our reach with a fairly small resource base? And I mentioned responsiveness, and I thought this might be an interesting thing to share in terms of our journey. I think in the past we've done things quite well. Francesco mentioned, implementation of things like CRM and portal and social media. Of course, we have lots of investments there as well. but often the timeframes and the ability for us to plug in new solutions that we haven't maybe thought of today is one of the challenges we're trying to face now. So I think there's really three elements to that. Technology, certainly, and that's probably the easiest to talk about, but also process and people. So from technology point of view, and I might give you an example, we know that there'll be disruptions that we'll need to react as an organisation to be able to provide services. So, for example, we ran a large trade mission. We still run trade missions and events. We put a solution in that's a cloud provided solution, a software as a service solution. We did that in 3 months' time, which is a very short time frame compared to what we might have done years ago. And that approach of being able to do things quite rapidly and being able to leverage technology is one thing, but I think the process and the capability of the organisation really has to change, and that's part of our journey. I guess part of that is being able to have the room to experiment and fail. So we have a term within Austrade that we are allowed to fail, but we fail fast. We do it in a short time frame. And culturally, I think that's a very interesting thing for us because it changes the way we fund our projects and initiatives, the way we govern them, assess risk, the way that we fund and project manage things. This is not a new concept, but perhaps for a government agency, working at the pace of a startup is perhaps something that we haven't been able to do in the past. We have regulations, we have procurement guidelines, we have security restrictions, all of those other things. So talking about startups, I wonder sometimes if we were a startup, would we have the same footprint that we do today? Would we actually be a digital company rather than the offices that we have? So that's some of the thinking that we've gone through in terms of transforming the organisation. If I can, just a couple more moments. I think the other thing that successful tech companies do is not only do they experiment, they fail fast, they iterate over small pieces of things and they learn and adapt from that. I think the other thing they do is well, how can I say this? I think the other thing they do is they have the funding and the backing to be able to innovate. So a funding model is typically in government, I'm going to write up a business case, I'm going to give you all of the benefits of this large portal or project or CRM replacement, and in government perhaps or in TPOs that doesn't always lead to success because we haven't kept the user and kept our stakeholders on board throughout this cycle. And I think splitting things up into small chunks and being able to iterate and deliver is something that tech startups do, something that we're doing internally, and that's been very successful for us. So that's around process. I think I'll give you another example. We have some gaps in capability in our workforce, I guess, in our skills, like probably many large organisations do. It's really up to us to explore what others can do to help us and to build our capability. So that is very much about partnering, but maybe not with big players, with small players actually. Small SMEs that can assist us, that can springboard our solutions into transforming what we do. And I'll just finish up with some of the workforce challenges that we have. I guess digital is a fantastic opportunity for us as an organisation to be able to connect and collaborate. I think, Yassir, when we were talking yesterday, a lot of professional service organisations do this very well. They're always connected, they're always mobile. And we have a very mobile workforce with a great set of tools that can pretty much connect you anywhere, anytime, so that our workforce can get the right information at the right time at any place. And so we have this concept of a digital backpack that allows our workforce to roam and to be able to be connected, and that has some huge possibilities for us in terms of where we are located and how our workforce is deployed across the globe. I think there'll always be human connections, of course, but do we need a presence in all of the places that we are today? Well, with technology, that's a big disruptor for us, I think, internally. So that's something I wanted to share also.
Thank you, Niels, for sharing that. I keep in mind the fact that you cannot answer digitally your clients if you're not digital yourself. And I like the idea of the concept of the digital backpack, something to think about for every organization. Maybe turning to Danielle Kung, that adopted very early, a long time ago, this startup mindset in completely redesigning your organization to address these challenges. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you think about your next wave of change and in terms of redesigning your organization and making it evolve to be able to answer to the unknown, let's say, future trends in digital?
Yeah, thank you very much, Yasir. One of the difficulties of an organization like ours is, of course, to kind of balance between the bricks and the clicks. We have, on one way, we have our traditional clients who want to be served traditionally, and for those we have our traditional service offerings. And then we have a set of new clients, or of clients who are changing, of clients who are doing their digital transformation and need a different type of service offering for us and from us. And this, how shall I say, this balancing act between the bricks and the clicks, as we call it, is probably one of the biggest challenges we feel. For Switzerland, this is extremely important because we're a small country. We rely on export. We have no home market of size. We're 8 million people. So about 70 cents of every Swiss franc, we earn it through international activities. Meaning that in these times of adverse conditions, we talked about them this morning, increased protectionism, political uncertainty, sluggish growth of the world economy, trade that is not accompanying the growth of GDPs and all that. It's getting more and more important that we help our companies, even under these conditions and under these circumstances, to find the way into new markets. So we have to adapt to how they act, and many of the buzzwords have already been said here. Francisco, you said something of community managers. That's extremely important. We also call it capability managers. When before we did all the consulting ourselves, why should we do that nowadays? That there's so much data available on companies who are more specialized in the fields of interest than we are. Why should we not just link them with our clients, with our customers? So instead of operating a consulting force, why don't we operate rather a network which links the demand to the existing offers? This is Uberization, what we're doing. Why opening up a new taxi companies and not just link available transport capacity with transportation demand? So we're moving more in this direction of being capability and community managers, bringing offer and demand together. And we're doing that in a way that we said, we needed a new strategy, and instead of building a strategy how we did it in the old days, based on our strengths, inside-orientated, you know, vision, mission statements, where do we want to be, what do we want to do, strategic initiatives and all that. We said, let's do it completely different. Let's go out, let's talk to the clients, let's ask them what you want from us, and then build up a prototype on paper, go back to the client and say, is that more or less what you expect from us? And when they say yes, we start working on it. And like this, we have identified 7 areas where we can improve and make things completely different than we've done it so far. Now, how do we bring these clicks in line with the bricks? We have taken a part of our resources, 5% of the personnel resources, and we have said, these people, we want to lead them like startups. We give them the task to develop these new systems, these 7 models. They respond to one person within our organization, not to the whole management team. They have no set of rules, just the basic things which we all have, but I mean, they are not directed. They can really go the way they want to go, but they have to come up with solutions. And we want them to do it in the design thinking way. Do something, go and test it in the market. If it's good, improve it. If it's bad, throw it away. Do something else. And really like this, when we see something works, we can start swapping from the traditional method into the new method. So this allows us to keep the personal relation, to keep the traditional way of working, while at the same time developing what's asked and what's required today, and change as we see that the market wants it and the market accepts it.
Thank you for sharing that. Very interesting mindset in becoming, have incubating startups internally, because we recognize that we do not know where the future is evolving, and so allowing ourselves to experiment on new ways of delivering services, and the better survives, and the other one is just, retry again. So I like a lot this internal capability of readapting to the future and the unknown. Thanks for sharing that. Turning to James Doran from from Dmcc, where you went probably a step further, or another step, where you've identified that in order to be able to support your clients, you also needed to better understand the digital world, and you went to the step of doing a research, almost I wouldn't say fundamental research, but you want to really talk to everybody and understand what your clients wanted, what they meant by digital, and what they expected from you. And this is one of the research and the publication that you shared with us. Can you talk a bit more about that for the audience? Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much, and thank you for everybody. It's been a long but very fruitful and really fascinating day. So I'll be as brief as I can, but I'll tell you a little bit about Dmcc first. We're a Dubai government entity that was established in 2002 to facilitate and encourage trade, primarily in commodities. We're a regulator of trade, and we're also a free zone. We offer facilities, physical and otherwise, to companies from all over the world. We've got about 12,700 of them at the moment. And really, that's how our digital transformation story began, is we were attracting an awful lot of companies from all over the world. About 90% of our member companies, we call our clients, were from overseas. And we literally had lines out the door. We couldn't get them to fill out registration forms and license forms fast enough. And we were turning business away, which is never a good thing. And so we very rapidly and very comprehensively entered our own digital transformation project 3 or 4 years ago now, and completed that, as I say, very, very rapidly. And in the process, we learned a great deal about digital transformation. And it dawned upon us that if we were in the business of facilitating trade and attracting foreign direct investment, then surely all of our clients, our member companies, must be going through the same transformation at the same time as us, and that we really ought to be getting ready and preparing ourselves for the future, for the next step. Because remember, this is 3 or 4 years ago when the primary sort of focus of this sort of digital transformation was more sort of operational and perhaps digital channels and digital interfaces, rather than digital strategy and looking at formulating digital enterprise, for example. So we have two aspects of digital transformation from DMCC's perspective. One is this very sort of hands-on operational transformation that I've described from our own perspective. And the second is an external one, and that is showing our member companies and listening to our member companies to determine and to discover what it is that they need. And that's kind of where our department came in researching this piece of work, the future of trade, that we spent much of the last 12 months putting together. We went out into the world for 9 or 10 months doing sort of very hands-on research in Africa, China, India, Europe, Middle East, asking as many participants as we could, about 150 in all, what they saw as the future of trade. What is the future of trade? And obviously, the answer that came back very resoundingly, as nobody in this room will be surprised to hear, was that the future of trade is digital. And again, that meant different things to many different people, from every step of the supply chain, really, and every level in every strategy that you can imagine. So we listened to them and compiled this report, and then we engaged in a process of economic analysis to produce some tools also. We produced an index so we can monitor the sort of how rapidly the world of global trade, as determined by the participants that are identified by Eurostat and by the World Bank, so we can monitor what proportion of the world of trade is digitalized. And surprisingly, of those participants, our first outing of the index shows about 42% of that body of companies is fully digitalized. But that also means there's an awful long way to go, another 60% of companies around the world. And the other conclusion we reached was that if all the companies identified in those databases, Eurostat and World Bank, were to adopt this end-to-end digital strategy, we would create about 350 million more exporters, which, and in particular, the vast majority of those clusters would be in places like Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. So producing massive opportunity through the application of fairly readily available and fairly simple digital strategy. Simple to us now, certainly not simple 5 years ago, for example, but readily available and readily adaptable. So there were really exciting conclusions that we came to. And we're in the process of putting together our second edition of the Future of Trade at the moment, which is why it's particularly fascinating and useful to be here amongst such a diverse group of experts and opinion today, because what we seek is more and more input. And we would like to reach out to everybody participating in this conference, for example, to engage in the research process for our upcoming Future of Trade report, so we can see just how far we've come in the past 12 months. And that's really easy to do. You just log on to futureoftrade.ae, the prefix for the United Arab Emirates, the suffix, I should say. So futureoftrade.ae, and we can all participate in this ongoing global digitalization process. So it comes full circle. And so that really is how DMCC operates in this sort of digital transformation. We accumulate this knowledge base and this thought leadership, and we pass these findings on to our member base, who in turn implement them in their corporate strategies and their growth strategies, and become sort of truly global players in trade. And if you have time, we have a very brief video that we could watch also. It's about 45 seconds, 50 seconds long, so perhaps we could play that. And that summarizes, I think, much better than I can, the future of global trade from a digital perspective.
Okay.
Trade is all around us, from the moment we wake, fueling the global economy with goods and ideas, from the most complex to the most fundamental of elements. Trade is about work. Trade is about capital. Trade is about power. Shifting from north to south, from west to east, driving prosperity, creating opportunity, fulfilling ambition. Historic ties, building partnerships of the future along highways on land, sea, air, and in the ether. Connecting millions of people every second, making billions of trades every day, worth trillions of dollars every year, year after year. In uncertain times, trade persists, forging new paths to ensure an ever brighter future, a digital future, where the right people, the right ideas, and the right products are forever in the right place. For the right place is right here. We have built a complex global web of interconnected people, ideas, and things. Used in every walk of life, in every corner of the planet. Efficiency, driving growth, driving opportunity, driving prosperity. This is the future of trade. The future of trade is digital.
Thank you, James. What I like from what you're saying is also the fact that you felt almost the obligation to be a thought partner and a thought leader on digital with your clients in order to increase their awareness, because you felt that as being one of the largest hubs of traded goods globally, you had to shift also to a mindset of a digital hub, and you had to push also your clients to that mindset, and this research is also helping that. So thank you all for these remarks. I would like to, we have another 30 minutes left. We behaved well in the timing. Thank you. And so I'd like to open the floor to take 4 or 5 questions, and then hopefully we can do maybe a second round of questions. Can we have a microphone, please? I think a microphone is coming in 5 seconds. Thank you.
My name is Hanan Taha. I'm from Palestine Trade Center from Palestine. My question actually is for the TIPOs organization who adopted the digitalization for trade. I think that there will be a cost for adapt such technique within the organizations that affect either the tools that you used, also the human resources within the TPO. How you deal with these issues first to adapt the new technique and the digitalization of the trade. In addition, using this, the digital trade is an ongoing and is grow rapidly. So how you are going to deal with for the new changes, the new updates in these techniques? Because I think that means you will put an investment in terms of following this growth rapidly within the worldwide in order to follow and to be part of the globalization and the growth in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question over there.
Thank you. My name is Gerard Mangouam from NAPEX from Côte d'Ivoire. We heard about all these victory on trade, and I'm sure that they all are right. The question that I would like to ask to all of them is what is the parallel that we should put on the traditional trade and the digital trade which is ongoing? Because I think that all the digitalization process should be based on what is exist now, right? So can you explain a little bit that? One thing is we have to look at the speed, the level of speed in the digitalization process, depending on the transfer technology or the type of technology that we are using, particularly for tools, and also look at the efficiency. So for TPOs that is going to be involved in this for the next 10 years, is there any measurements or any kind of criteria that we should put in place to see how we are performing, you know? So to sum up, trade is now called traditional trade, but is sometimes are also digitalized. But we are not at the top level of the total digitalization process. So how do you perceive that in the next 10 years, most of our TPOs? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So maybe let's start with these two questions, and then might take a second round. The first question was on human resources and how basically to keep the pace, right? And continue having the right level of let's say, training, of education, of preparation of the human resources in order to face those ever-changing challenges. Who'd like to share any experience on how they've done that?
Well, maybe a first aspect of the answer, Hanan, to what you asked. We cannot do everything ourselves. We do not have the financial means. I guess that's what you also tried to suggest. For sure, I think digitizing our organization means three things. It means getting access to data. Number two, it's manage this data. Number three is distribute the results and put them in motion. And for the first aspect, to get access to the data, you have to partner up with organizations. For instance, we did recently partnerships with Google. We did another one with Microsoft. And just to give you an example, with Google, we developed tools called Export Digital, which you can find on the internet, where you, if you're a manufacturer of high precision pressure gauges, for instance, and you want to export to Latin America, but you don't know what country, you can simply put in the name of your product into a Google search, and it tells you how much in the respective countries, target countries, somebody has searched for that type of product. So it shows you it's much more popular in country A than it is in country B. There should be a higher demand in country A than it is in country B. And like this, you can, with a very low entry barrier from your desk, you can get an initial information where you might do deeper analysis. So this is one of the things. The second is what Francisco said, you need a powerful CRM, a powerful customer relation management system which manages this data you have found access to and which allows you to get out the right information you need. And the third then is network. You need networks around you. You need to be center of this of these community platforms to disseminate the information, and part of other networks to bring the information in there. So it's not something you have to do all on yourself. It's just something where you have to link the ends to bring it together.
I think Niels also wanted to share.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have a similar story. We can't possibly do all of the things ourselves. We don't have the expertise and the capability. Similar to Danielle, of course, we collect a lot of valuable information in our CRM, and I'd have to say our CRM is the core of our digital strategy, our digital platform. Everything around CRM is added on, but CRM is really the centre. And for us internally, we've exploited some of that information, but we didn't have the skills, for example, in visualising and exploiting some of the data. We know we have the data, but we don't exploit it to the best of our abilities. So again, we've partnered with a small Australian organisation that helped us to build a data visualisation to be able to connect or to be able to visualise the connections that we hold in our CRM. Now, it turns out that that company didn't have the right technology, but had the thought leadership. And so we ended up partnering with them for the thought leadership and with another company, a much larger vendor, for the technology. I think the answer will always be, look outside for the skills that you need to employ, especially for us around data visualisation.
Thank you. Our second question was about understanding and realizing that in the traditional trade and the way to digitalization hasn't penetrated to its full potential, although it is starting. And the question was around how can we measure our performance on how we deliver against digitalization. Did I capture the question right, or would you like to restate it?
I think it's fine.
Thank you. James.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, the thing that struck me from your question was really people often get sort of somewhat sort of held up by this comparison between something that's called traditional trade and digital trade. And there is no comparison. I mean, trade's trade. I mean, to quote one famous trader, you buy for $1, you sell for $2. That's it, And traditional trade, we've got bills of lading, and we've got Rolodexes full of contacts all over the world. And we're just, you apply a CRM, as everybody said so far, rather than those sort of traditional pieces of paper. And that's pretty much it. The trade persists as it has done since, the 14th, 15th, and 13th century globally. And we're just applying new ways of communication and new ways of interacting and new ways of applying our knowledge across the board. And that's it. So there's no this. The only reason I mention it all may sound very obvious, but is that we encountered that frequently on our research project around the world. But it's like, how do I get there? How do you know that you're digitally trading now and you're not traditional anymore? It's like, well, it's a process and it will continue. It persists. It continues ad infinitum. You must continue to invest in your knowledge base, and it's a process of adaptation rather than it's a transformation that has no end in sight. You continually transform, right? I mean, does that sum it up? I hope that is somewhat illuminating and doesn't confuse you further. So, but basically, there is no difference. It's a process.
So maybe a follow-up question on that, which is on the measurement part. Do any of your organizations use any barometers or to understand how well you're responding to your clients' digital demands on that specific parameter, which is digital? Do you have a specific tool which is either barometers or surveys, or how do you basically judge your performance delivering on those demands?
I mean, we have a very specific tool which doesn't speak directly to our member companies, other than it speaks to them collectively as participants in global trade, and that's the Dmcc Industry Digitalization Index. And that's literally tracking how digitalized the world of global trade is becoming, looking at every company, every participant one by one, and tracking its progress. And again, as more and more companies come online, at some point we will reach a saturation point. But yeah, so we don't respond to our members' needs directly with dashboards and such, because we're not in the business of doing that, although we have them internally. But I think the digital index that we produce is and it's available for free. It's part of our thought leadership knowledge base. Is incredibly useful. It shows you which parts of the world are adopting digital strategy at a more rapid clip than others, and then you sort of dig down into it and you can see what's enabling that in terms of sort of national communications infrastructure or national GDP growth or whatever. So that's a really useful tool to look at the big picture. It's the DMCC Industry Digitalization Index.
Thank you. I'll turn back to the audience to collect maybe another couple of questions.